Welcome to this latest edition of the Ril Dil podcast, The Wire Remixed, Season 1, Episode 11, The Hunt. As always, I'm joined by one Robert Sapp. How you doing this afternoon?
Doing well, doing well.
This episode was directed by Steve Schill. It ranked 17th all-time in terms of Vulture's Wire episodes ranking. And, of course, you had the epigraph of Dope on the Damn Table by one, of course, Lieutenant Cedric Daniels. A episode where you have a lot of moving pieces. You had the remnants, the fallout from the Kima shooting, and you had people questioning whether or not all this was worth, this case was worth it. You begin with the opening scene. They're canvassing the crime scene with a bunch of cops from different various organizations. You got the FBI's there, the DEA was there. Of course, you got the detail. Then you got the cops from the from the Eastern and Western districts. So a bunch of people are there. A bunch of people are there. They find out that the gun slipped under Kima's seat, so that's why she couldn't get back to it. You have Landsman ask Rawls for his assistance. Rawls tells everybody basically to stop, so the right police could do the right work, because of how many moving pieces there were, just to make it easier to investigate. So that was kind of to open up the scene. That opened up the that opened up the episode, and then you would have Landsman and Bunk figure out that realize that there were multiple shooters, and also realize that those shooters, and we all know that they were turned. We will find out. It would come to find out that it would be Weebay and Lil Man. We found out that they were picked up. Through their investigation. They found some fresh boot prints, and they found out they were picked up. So a lot of moving pieces in this particular opening scene, and in terms of the investigation, the fallout of Kima getting shot. What were your thoughts on this opening scene?
Yeah, like you said, a lot of moving parts that are going on within the scene. I think like when I was watching it, the thing I appreciated the most this time around was just kind of like how it was shot, and then and how that transferred to like how chaotic it was. I remember the first time seeing this, and then I remember, subsequent times after, and just how chaotic it always seemed. Just as like just a viewer, like inhaling it and not knowing like all the different ways the pieces. And so like watching it this time, I was like just kind of like really paying attention to like what they were doing. And yeah, I mean like that just the intentionality of it is kind of what I'm getting at. It is chaotic, and it feels chaotic because they shot it that way, they directed it that way. It's awesome. So that's the thing that just kind of like really imprinted on me this time. That was different than any other time.
Rawls also realizes that during that scene that the signpost was thrown off, that the hoppers or the barbershop people threw off the signpost. That's the number one reason, or one of the major reasons why they could not catch up with Kima in time. That threw off the direction in terms of that signpost. So he switches that signpost. He realized that the signpost was switched in the wrong direction to throw the cops off. So you had that going on. You had that going on as well. Weebay and Little Man take a call from confirm the stringer that the job is done. Weebay says to Little Man, always some shit. Well, first, no, Little Man says to Weebay, I wonder who I wonder who Kima was, wonder who she was. He says, nah, he says, I wonder who that bitch was. And then Little Man, then Weebay says, always some shit. As they're taking the cars, they're confirming the stringer that the job is done. This call, of course, would be detected by the detail in the wire later on. So before we get to the hospital, anything that you thought, any thoughts about that quick scene?
No, I mean, like the scene is to set up what Freeman will figure out later on in the episode. So you got that piece right there. I wanted to go half a second back to Rawls looking to finding the street signs. That now we know that was said on the wire, or they were talking about that in the car, but they don't know it as of that time. And so just a example of show and tell. Like they showed us in the last one because they're having a conversation about it. But this time it's super effective because Rawls just kind of gets up. The way they shoot it just kind of looks, turns the signs over, doesn't say anything about it at all. Like no words are used. So anyways, just a example of show not tell that I appreciate it.
So we go to the hospital. Rawls consoles McNulty. McNulty, of course, is in complete shock, even going back to the crime scene when Rawls talking to him, was sitting down at the crime scene. But McNulty was sitting down. He was sitting down, had blood, Kima's blood on him. When they get to the hospital, he consoles McNulty and basically says, there's no way that you're responsible for getting the cop shot. McNulty is in pure just guilt and pity party mode, feeling like he's responsible for getting Kima shot and possibly killed. Because at this point, no one knows, and even at the end of the episode, we don't know whether or not Kima was going to make it. She's basically in critical condition. She took 2 shots. They both went through and through. So they don't know whether she's going to live or die at this point. McNulty feels guilty. They play, and by the way, and this was some cold shit. They played a tape, the actual tape that had it going through. They played the actual tape that heard the shooting, where you hear the gunshots. And it's leading up to everything that's going to happen. Kima's giving directions on where they were trying to lead the cops, trying to give signals to the cops on where she's at. So they play that tape. And then that's when, of course, McNulty throws up in the trash can once he hears the gunshots from the tape that's played in the hospital. And then you have Rawls, of course, come over and basically say, you're not responsible for this. You're a gaping asshole. We both know this, but I'm not going to sit up here and let you believe that we're responsible for getting a police shot. He says, she took 2 for the company. That's how we're going to look back. She took 2 for the company, and that's how this is, we're going to look back at this, basically, to paraphrase what he said. And he helps McNulty up. What were your thoughts on that exchange and that, that part of it was multiple hospital scenes, but first part of the hospital scene?
Yeah. So I've been thinking how I want to structure my thoughts on this one, but then as you were talking about it, a lot, there's a lot that's going on there, and it's all intertwined throughout the episode. But there's a lot that's going on in this scene. So I can't wait to talk about it until other stuff happens either. So I guess I'll kind of like start my running commentary of where I think they wanted to end up in this episode with this. So unpacking this scene, I would say number one thought that came to my mind when I first started, when I was watching this today, was just like consequences and realism. Um, I think especially at this point in time in The Wire, in television, in this television at this point in time, 2003, I believe this was. Um, and so consequences wasn't a big thing. That wasn't a big thing. Shows focused in on. And so taking the time to do an entire episode about the consequences of actions was big. And I think like that's a through line they'll have through this entire episode. And then I think the realism is messy. It's not clean. It's not tied up in a bow. And so I think the best way to interact with what I mean by that realism is McNulty and Rawls and their conversation in terms of um, there are a lot of emotions that of course go into the situation, and here we have two very stated rivals in the show, opposites, who in this moment of tragedy to them um, are able to communicate in ways that's not possible outside of this circumstance. And I think that's the bit of realism that they'll keep coming back to. And probably like the through line I'll keep coming back to is this circumstance is so unique that it causes actions that you don't necessarily attribute to certain people, or ramifications that aren't necessarily in line with what everybody has done thus far. But it's okay because they play this entire episode and play this entire scene so realistic. There's no, I'm not no, but there's not the normal for this, especially for this day and time that this was written in, the normal hyperbole around a big incident like this.
Yeah, you also had during this scene, the hospital scene, right before they played the tape, the commissioner had no idea who Cedric Daniels was. He goes to shake Norris's hand, and then Norris basically says, "This is Cedric Daniels." So you had that going on, which give you some insight to the powers that be.
There's a lot of institutional racism examples in this episode. That was one right there.
Yeah,
and I say that because, like, again, this is 2003, and they were knee deep in it. The Wire was.
Yeah.
No, 2002. Sorry. Oh wait, 2001. See, I got on anyway. I've been watching different seasons. So yeah. This is the first one. 2003 is season 3, I think, or 2. Anyways, keep going.
Yeah. So yeah, you had that as an example. Like you said, there were a number of examples later on in this episode, to say the least, of that. And by that commissioner, by the way. Freeman and Perez are going over the calls to Stringer, still trying to determine who made that call, who made those calls to Stringer. At this point, they're not able to confirm that. But of course, later on in the episode, they will, we will go over that they would confirm who were making those calls to Stringer, which was a big reveal later on in the episode. You have Wee-Bey and Stringer. So Stringer already knows that Kima was a cop even before Wee-Bey. This was at the print shop, by the way. Stringer already knows that Kima was a cop before even Weebay starts talking. Weebay comes into the shop and immediately starts talking. Stringer shuts him down and then runs the copy machine and then tells him to talk. And Weebay completely throws Lil Man under the bus. He says, shit went good until, shit went good. Like, we had things were going as according to plan. And then, we didn't, we didn't know that there was a girl in the car. He said, now, and this is where he throws Lil Man on the bus. He says, if it was up to me, I would let the girl go. She didn't seem like the talking type, but Little Man popped off and took the shots and shot at her. Now, we all know, watching that scene from last episode, that they both came out shooting like the Wild Wild West. There was no hesitation. There was no, hold up, Little Man. Who's this girl? No, that dialogue did not happen. So Weebay's lying and completely throwing, and rightfully so. He's gonna throw, between him and Lil Man, he's gonna throw him, he's gonna choose himself. I don't blame him. But we know Weebay's story. That part of the story is bullshit. So of course, look, Weebay having a relationship that he had with Stringer, he took advantage of that too, because they have a close relationship. Stringer, of course, believes it and tells Weebay that Shorty was a cop. She not dead. Weebay gives the famous look, where he puts his covers his mouth, does one of these. That became a internet gaffed for years to come. Puts covering his mouth and just complete shot that Kima was a cop. He was like, she wasn't a cop. She was one of Orlando's hoes. And even Stringer asked him where the guns at. He still can't believe it. Then Stringer, had to be, was more forceful, saying, "Babe, where the fuck are the guns?" And Weebay says, we threw them in the storm drawer, or whatever, threw them down to a storm drain. And Weebay gives Weebay orders to kill Little Man. Because apparently this is not the first time Little Man's fucked up and done some dumb shit. So he gives him the orders to kill him, and then tells Stringer, he tells Weebay, look, you gotta get out of Dodge. This shit's about to be, this shit has hit the fan. About to fall back. Where your people's at? And then he sends them off to, says, chooses Philly, DC. Says Philly and DC, but we find out, of course, we know that he's going to Philadelphia. Sends Weebay off, says, hey, no profile, no connects. We have to, be careful about this moving forward. What were your thoughts? A lot going on in this scene.
Yeah, you pretty much kind of like broke down every part of the scene. Yeah, I mean, like, again, like the overarching theme in my head is consequences, right? Like, I mean, they messed up. It's that simple. But you can go over the details. They can go over the details if they want to, but it doesn't matter. They messed up. A cop has been shot. It is it's a wrap on everything that they were normally doing. And so, like, yeah, again, like, this is good stuff because it shows the consequences from both sides on a very, very unique action.
Yeah, going back to and we'll get to that because we're going to elaborate on the Barksdales fucking up, on them fucking up. We will certainly get to that part later on in the episode. But yeah, to your point, yeah, a cop has been shot, and they have to basically kind of retreat and kind of rethink their next moves for the future. So you had that going on. They go back to the hospital. The commissioner refuses to talk to Kima's girlfriend. Kima's girlfriend had been, whose name is Cheryl. She had Carver goes to her apartment and gets her, lets her know Kima's been shot. They go to the hospital. She comes to the hospital, and the commissioner refuses to talk to her. Sends Burrell to do it, and then of course you have Burrell. Burrell comes in and goes and talks to Kima's girlfriend. And Burrell was even confused about the relationship with Kima and his girl. It's like, Kima and her girl. They didn't. I mean, they didn't. They just said Daniels just says, you know, a roommate as he's giving him information, as he's giving Burrell the information. So you had that going on in that part of the in that scene. Really, you know, I that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the commissioner. So not much. Did you take anything away from that scene? That part, that scene.
Yes. So there are two parts to this. So we got to go back just a little half a step before a scene you didn't mention, but was very, very uh I really enjoy watching it. And it was when they find out that Kima has or who comes back. Anyways, this is when all the policemen.
No, I know what you're talking about. So Freeman. So okay, going back to the crime scene. Freeman comes back to Freeman comes to the crime scene.
Right.
They're just sitting there. Everybody's just basically sitting on their ass doing nothing. Yeah. Not everybody, but you have Herc, Carter sitting on their ass doing nothing.
They're talking. They're talking. Not doing anything.
Not doing nothing. They're talking. They're just talking.
They're talking.
Sitting down.
Well, it's after everybody's been removed. Like nobody can do anything crime scene wise. Yes. So it's like everybody's been backed off.
So you have them sitting down talking, and Freeman comes in and basically kind of restores order. Says, "Look, let's go. You gotta get back on this wire. Gotta get back on these. We need somebody to get back on these rooftops." Herc says, "Fuck you," and you know, Freeman's like, "Fuck me." Like, where do you want to be if you have the Barksdales talking shit because a cop got shot? Where do you want to be? And of course, Freeman is 1,000% right. They go and you have Herc. Carver sends Herc there first because he needs somebody to.
So this is why I want you to pause. Pause right there. Pause right there. Just because there's a lot that's going on in that, and there's a breakdown. There's a breakdown of that, right? So it's like initially, Freeman comes. The group sense is fuck that, not fuck Freeman. Like that, Freeman's a bad guy, but it's like fuck that. Kima's been shot. Nobody wants to be playing on the wire, and then Freeman, to your point, restores order because he says he reingratiates the idea because this can be an integral part of finding out who killed Kima. And so they get really motivated at that point in time, and Herc and Carver, for the first time in the series, kind of start their investigative minds going in terms of where they're like what part here like so it's just that little like they talk about which rooftop they're going up to that'll be the best to scout out. So their investigative minds start to go, and so they both start to go off. Now, why I wanted you to pause right there is Carver actually didn't send Herc anywhere. The question that's asked is, did any get in contact with working role? I mean, they both kind of stop, but Carver stops and then, without words, gives the kind of like, you like, I've done that, and then says, you know, I'll go the way too. I'll go and do that. Now, the reason why I really enjoy watching this is because, you know, there are a couple things that you can really do once you've really explored like a series. It's like you can put on all the little breadcrumbs. At least that's what I love to do when I go back and I'm really rewatching something. And so here, what I found here is the first breadcrumb of the difference between Herc Carver. Like the significant difference between the two. We'll find out something about Carver at the end of the series, at the end of this episode, you know, the season. But even with that being said, this is a separator right here. Herc continues on or whatever, but Carver doesn't even, it's not even a thing. Of course he's going to go to her peoples, and of course he's not going to call her. He's going to go right there and wait for her, as we'll see and we'll find out. So I just found that was like a really important separator, particularly with what we're going to find out about Carver at the end of the series. His heart is in a space than her is, and that part, and then like I said, is little breadcrumbs, but even breadcrumbs throughout this episode of how much Herc and Carver have grown even within this short amount of time in terms of their police skills. So that's why I wanted to jump back and zoom in on that one. In terms of it's, again, the characters, going back to the commissioner and the talking about girlfriend, everything like that. We can't skip over stuff like that, like at all. I'm in the space, everybody's in the space. I know, but we can't skip over stuff like that because it's important, because they included it in the show. If they include it in the show, it's meaningful. And when they do it multiple times, it's uber meaningful. So the fact that they keep coming back at this offer and showing us his commissioner, and showing us his ignorance means something. And these characters are archetypes, meaning McNulty's not McNulty. McNulty represents detectives with privilege in the Baltimore Police Department. Bunk represents old school detectives who are playing the game in order to continue high. Friedman represents old school detectives who are not playing the game. So I say that to say that commissioner's not the commissioner. Doesn't matter. He's the institution. And what they're saying with the repeated at-bats at that commissioner is the institution is inherently racist, and the institution is inherently homophobic, gay bashing, everything. It's resistant to change. Anything that looks different than the power-based structure, and they do a really nice camera shot at the end. So I'll save it to then, because I noticed it very, very much this time, and it's very, very intentional. But they're saying something about the power structure and how stuck in the ways that the power structure is. Even in this intense situation where a lot of people are playing different parts, the system that allows that to keep going remains.
No question about it, and certainly we'll get back to the to that Carver Herc scene later on in this even in this episode. It's not completely revealed, but we find out something about the detail before this episode ends. So you have Freeman, Landsman, Bunk, Cole in the office. Freeman lets them know that this little man who shot, who's also who was also one of the shooters he picks up. Freeman, does great police work in getting a slice can, and he, of course, he makes that connection on the wire as well. So Freeman gets that. Gets that a bit of police work out. They and before he leaves out of there, he lets them know. They ask him where he's from. He's at pawn shop, kind of like throwing a dig at throwing a little dig from back where he was, where he was before he ended up with the detail. Again, you had Freeman, Landsman, Bunk, and Cole. They're scrambling, and then he basically comes up and figures out what it took 3 or 4 dudes to try to figure out over the course of this particular scene. What were your thoughts on him and his casework?
Freeman is a beast. I mean, like it again, like if we look at like it's another it's another big talking point for like being truly investigative. Um, the show's making an argument, and they are putting the final touches on their argument in this episode. And in a scene like this, which shows that even in a crisis circumstance, if you just take half a beat and kind of think through the problem instead of just reacting emotionally to it. This is the argument I think they're essentially making. Instead of reacting emotionally to it, you can get pretty good results. And so I think this seems a testament to that. Freeman is very much the voice of the show in this department in terms of thinking through scenarios and being investigative about it being the best course of action.
So you have Poop and Wallace on the phone. Wallace calls Poop, lets him know that he doesn't like the area, that he's not built to be out, in the country. And we kind of saw this at the end of last episode. If you notice in the scene with Daniels, and you start hearing crickets, and then he says, what's that? He says, and Daniel says crickets. So that gave you some insight already, even before this episode, even last episode, that Wallace was not long for the country. So you have that with Poop and Wallace talking. Before that, you had Bodie and D'Angelo talking about the shooting. Bodie was saying that who the fuck was Orlando and all this for him, and and then you had basically D'Angelo saying some things are going to start to change as far as there's gonna be some consequences to this, and Bodie saying how your uncle get when motherfuckers start fucking up. So they had that conversation before Poop walks away and goes talks to Wallace.
Yeah, this it pretty much is giving us the clock on Wallace. It's setting that up, and then also it's going to set up the anxiety that D'Angelo feels later on.
So Bubbles pages Kima, and then gets picked up by Vernon Holly, a cop that we have seen a couple of times over the course of this season, but not that many. He proceeds to ask Bubbles, why'd you make that call, or ask Bubbles about that call. And then without basically just jumps on top of Bubbles. Mind you, we saw how big Holly is, how big Vernon is compared to Bubbles. And he's beating up on Bubbles before Landsman comes in and breaks that up and restrains, takes Holly off, Vernon off Bubbles. And then you have Bubbles, calling for McNulty and Kima and calling for McNulty. Bubbles just cannot catch a break, even when he's trying to go clean. What are your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah. So this is one of those ones where there's a lot going on in this scene. And so this is when I connected back with the idea that the show's building upon its argument, right? Like in the argument presented with Lester is, if you take a step back and you investigate, you're able to yield better results. And so this will be Exhibit A in in this episode on that. There's another one coming. I can't remember if there's a third one, but definitely this is Exhibit A, and there'll be Exhibit B coming soon. Exhibit A is instead of asking questions, like for real questions, the officer just is enraged. He's, everybody's emotionally upset about Kima and wants to get answers quick. And so they're paying attention. He's paying attention to their buzzer, pick up Bubs instead of asking questions, just beats on Bubs. So you got that's Exhibit A for the argument. And then there also in there is the whole institutional part of it, right? Like it's a black cop beating up on a black suspect, quote unquote. And so that on the face, it is, it's not presented in the same way as other episodes will be. Incidents that happen in the series will be presented. But again, like I said, you could tell by as many at-bats as they took at the commissioner that what they're really talking about is the system, the systemic problems within it. Racism and how the police treat their community being a big one. And so in this instance, you not only have the overreaction that is not investigative, but you also have the overreaction that actually is harming a valuable resource for the police department, and shows just kind of like how institutional and wrong-headed a lot of the thinking is, and how it can lead to not the best results.
Yeah, he has no idea who Bubbles is, doesn't know that he's working with the detail. So he's just, this is, is what he's doing obviously is wrong, but it's just not, it's also a deterrent to the case, to the actual case that the detail is trying to bring on the Barksdales and even trying to find out who shot Kima. So this,
he's reacting emotionally.
Yes, with no investigation, with no nothing. It's all 100% emotion, what have you. It's nothing getting out. He's getting nothing out of this because Bubbles, Bubbles doesn't know anything about Kima. Bubbles at this point didn't even know Kima was shot. In terms of that scene, Bodie gets a stash from the payphone. So the Barksdales again have switched it up. At first, Bodie poses as if he's about to take a call from the payphone. Instead, he waits for the stash to come down out of a window, 5th or 6th floor window in the towers. You see Herc and Santangelo get the pictures and relay that message back to the detail in terms of back to Lester and Prez, who are back in the basement, back at the office. What were your thoughts on the Barksdale switching it up again as far as getting the stash out the window?
Yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with the Barksdales and switching anything up. This is about there's two things that this is about. This is all about the drugs being on the table. Like going back to the epigraph. This is all about drugs being on the table. Drugs being on the table in this episode is a bad thing because that will mean they will give up key components to it. And so Daniels, can I talk about this scene without talking about, I don't know if I could talk about this scene until we get to.
We're not on the Daniels McNulty scene.
No. I have to connect those two together.
Okay.
Until Daniels is talking about their strategy for the raids. We haven't even gotten to that point yet.
No.
So anyway, this is about drugs being on the table. I'll just end it at that. I'll come back and connect this
so
scene.
We have Daniels and McNulty. McNulty, of course, is back at the detail. He's drinking. He's drinking. Daniels basically tells him to stop drinking and do your job. He asks McNulty. McNulty asks him, was the case worth it? says the case, says the case wasn't worth it. Daniels basically says, we don't get to make that call. You don't get to make that call, do your job. And he takes the liquor bottle from McNulty. What were your thoughts on that?
Oh, I love this scene. I loved every single solitary second of this scene. And I've been thinking a lot about The Wire lately and why is that the show is so just personally enjoyable to me. And a show that is truly great is one that conveys a message over time. And so I was thinking about the amount of time that has gone by and like all the different things that happened, not only in my life, but in the world since 2003, literal 2003, 2002, 2001, when they're doing this show versus 2020 and how so much rings so true now as it did then. So the overall messaging is great. They're hitting on themes that, of course, are unanimous throughout human history, right? Like that's a big indicator of a great show. And then the second one is, for me, is just the complexity of the characters. How I understood Daniels and McNulty in 2003 is not how I understand them today. And that's great, because that's what a good show does. It's not going to leave you with one concept of a character, because then that's stagnant. And then when people move on from that, then that character goes away in the human consciousness. Or the show goes away in the human consciousness. It's impossible to do that with The Wire because the characters are so multi-layered. And so the reason I love this scene today wouldn't even have been in my conceptual range at 23, just because I didn't have the accumulation of life experiences to add on to that. And so what I loved about this scene is, you mentioned pity party in the beginning of the episode in McNulty, and that's absolutely what McNulty's doing. He's having himself his own private McNulty pity party. And what I love about this scene is Daniels has no time for it at all, but also does it in a way that doesn't shut down who McNulty is, because his value to the detail is his, what's the thing they always talk about in basketball or with sports, right? Like, it's like the thing that makes you don't get rid of that. You just try to tone it a little bit, right? So like mostly it's talked about with very intense players, somebody in the Ron Artest or Dennis Rodman kind of camp, where, yeah, a lot of stuff they do gets them in trouble off the court, but it's exactly that what makes them great on the court, right? So you can't take that away in their life without taking that away from the court. That's kind of like the thought process with that, or the hidden subtext, however you want to go that. So I say that to say with McNulty, right? I give McNulty a lot of shit for a lot of different things. But what Daniels knows is he can't completely take that fire away from him. So he shuts him down off the pity party, but then reignites him in terms of the investigative, like, let's go get some shit done for Keena. And so, as somebody who's had to supervise adults, I recognize how hard that is. Which I would have had no context for in 2003 at 23, which I do have very much for. So I really appreciated the skill of what Daniel did and how he did it.
Yeah, he shuts him down, but it's kind of one of those where he doesn't go all in and basically says, stop feeling sorry for yourself. And he does. It's the shutdown is quick. It's efficient. It's quick, to the point.
There you go. He says what needs to be said in the moment. It doesn't need to get personal, because this is not what that's about right now. Nothing about that. So he says what he needs to say in the moment, in as much as he needs to say it to your efficiency point, and then moves on.
And during that exchange, of course, McNulty gets a call from Bunk about Bubbles. We'll get to that because we have a big scene coming up now. So Avon and Stringer been sitting on this point for about 6 weeks, anticipating this scene. So they meet. They are back at the club. Of course, the club is closed. Orlando's is closed. Stringer comes in with the money that they were, comes in with the money that Orlando had, the $30,000. Avon reprimands. Let me set it up. So Stringer basically goes through all the beats in terms of, all right, Savino got a story, you can stick to it. He tells him about Little Man. I got to put Weebay. He put Weebay on that. So everything is tightened up, despite the current situation. Everything seems to be tightened up until Stringer brings up the money. Avon says this cash got us caught up, and then Stringer says, "My bad. That was my fault. I told Savino and Weebay and them they can get Orlando and take their payday as well." Avon goes basically sort of berserk and basically rips into the Stringer and says, "How could you, Orlando having $30,000? What do it say? How could you make a mistake this egregious?" Now, thinking about this scene and thinking about this exchange, a couple things came to my mind. First, I thought about there's no way that a number 2 in a major drug organization should make a mistake this egregious. No way. Not by any stretch of the imagination. It's just no, especially considering how smart and how sharp, for the most part, Stringer is. We know later on, of course, in the series that Stringer's going to make a number of mistakes, but not as a number 2. Those will be when he's top dog. This mistake is so egregious that it triggered my thoughts about your theory, a conspiracy theory in regards to the Stringer versus Avon. What were your thoughts?
I'm gonna let you go in because you say you've been holding on to this for 6 weeks.
Well, I mean,
so I'm gonna let you go in.
So you have these two sort of like Stringer. There's no question that Avon is the general. He's the king. He's the general. He's running shit. He's street smart. But Stringer makes this mistake, and it's like I was like, this is like a D'Angelo type of mistake, or this is like a Wallace type of mistake. Like this is not a mistake that a number 2 makes, and it just had me wondering about again about your theories on Stringer versus Avon, and then it also had me thinking how did they even meet? How did Stringer and Avon even connect, even get up, it had me wondering. It had me wanting to see a prequel in terms of how they got together, because Avon, and we'll see going on, and we'll see later on in this series, the types of people Avon connects to in regards to the street. Avon, a guy that, and I'll give a couple characters away, Chris Partlow and Avon would have been a perfect match. Avon and Slim Charles are a perfect match looking down the road. They are a perfect match. So with that being said, I just kind of got me to wondering about how did they connect? How did Stringer and how did Stringer get into this particular position? Now you can have a Stringer in your organization, but you need a street dude who understands the street at a higher level, who doesn't make this level of mistake. Because let me give you, not you, but the audience, how egregious this mistake is. So this basically cost them 3 people with this mistake. So Stringer has to send away Weebay. Weebay is their number 1 soldier. Weebay has to kill Little Man, and Savino has to go to jail. Those are 3 key soldiers that are sacrificed with this one move, and the cops are on their the cops are on their ass. But these are 3, even though now Stringer's not Stringer's fault that they shot a cop. That was just a coincidence of just a bad luck. That wasn't Stringer's. That wasn't not Stringer's. So I'm not gonna put that one on Stringer per se. But the ramifications of his decision to try to take $30,000, defraud Orlando for, I'm like, I'm not gonna, I don't want to step on your theory, but about that, but I just thought the risk versus the reward it just didn't make sense. And even I'm trying to think of like, what was the upside to this move? What was the upside to, unless he's trying to get in good with the Barksdale soldiers, that much more out of it, which I already thought he had a great relationship with Weebay and with those guys. So again, this was a move that a number 2 doesn't make, let alone a guy at the top should make. I mean, this is a bad mistake by Stringer, to say the least. Maybe not the worst we'll see in terms of the history of the Wire, but definitely top 5 bad decisions by Stringer. Definitely top 3 by Stringer. What were your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think our theories are different, but they might connect. But we also have plenty of time for that. In terms of, we have plenty of time for that. As I've been looking ahead at some there's plenty of time to talk about that, and then start connecting stuff together. But in terms of just the kind of the methodology of the Barksdale organization, you kind of, again, I can't say it enough. This is about consequences, and the fallout of something like this, and how significant it is on both sides. And so, to the point that you were making, this cost, man, this cost. And if you wanted to deliver an internal blow to the Barksdale organization, this would be exactly the way you would go about it, because they lost significant.
No question. So you have McNulty and Bubbles back to the police station. Holly, of course, the cop that beat the shit out of Bubbles, lies about the whole altercation. Says Bubbles raised up on him and shit went bad, even though Bubbles was handcuffed to a table, to a table, and weighs about 100 pounds less than Holly. So he lies about that. McNulty tells Bubbles about Kima, and then asks for help. Asks Bubbles for help. Says he need, can he go around the projects and start looking for who's not around, so he can start to connect some names and further the case. And gives Bubbles $20, which was extremely significant in this scene. Bubbles, of course, we all know is definitely trying to get clean, and he is clean. Yes, he is clean at this point. He's been clean for like a week now, or 3 days in terms of the last episode. He's been clean for like 3 days, and there were a couple instances where he was trying to insinuate McNulty that he was clean, and McNulty both times shut him down, and gave him a $20 bill. And basically, again, McNulty is fully at this point snapped out of his funk, as far as he's back into the case. He's back into the case mode at this point. Back focused on trying to get kind of catch whoever killed Kima, or any connections to solving this case, or to figuring out who shot Kima. So he's back. And he completely dismisses the fact that, again, Bubbles is trying to stay clean and give him the $20 bill. What were your thoughts?
So many. So yeah, I can't look at this scene any other way than to feel very, very, very sad for Bubbles and to be very, very annoyed with McNulty, but not like McNulty was trying to do something intentional, just mad at the how selfish he is. I mean, but it is a character flaw in which they have set up and will continue to be. That's the character flaw. I mean, it just is. That's part of, or just character, and it's one I see as a significant flaw. And then I mean, like the biggest thing is like so those are like the initial emotions, and just in terms of very very sad, just very sad for all involved in that. But on the flip side of that, that's what makes it a really good scene, and what the actors that do this for a living, everybody that's involved in the project. I mean, it just again, when I'm just immediately just snapped into the moment and just care so passionately about the outcome of a fictional character. Yeah, you're doing your job. You're doing your job, and they were doing their jobs, because all I was thinking about in that moment was damn it, no, just listen to him. Just ask him why he was waiting for Kima. Ask him why, and then don't give him that $20.
Yeah, so
and then Bubs, don't take that take that $20 and everything like that. But those are all components of a scene, but it's the people that's involved that makes that powerful.
So the $20 is significant because if you remember early in the season, McNulty, when Bubbles was doing some work with McNulty and Kima in the detail, this is early in the season. This might have been the third or fourth episode, maybe even the second or third episode. I think he gave him $20 that time. And Kima basically reprimands McNulty and says, like, what are you doing? You're going to spoil them. This was after Bubbles had left. Says you're gonna spoil them rotten, and then he says, McNulty says, I respect the work. So you have that, and then you also have the fact that by not allowing Bubbles to get out more than 2 words, McNulty doesn't know that Bubbles is actually clean. And Bubbles, somebody tried to get clean. There were a number of things that Bubbles brought up in that last phone call he had with Kima about or that meeting. It wasn't a phone call, it was a meeting with Kima before the day she got shot. I need a bed, I need this, need that. So there are a number of things that had to happen for him to feel successful about being clean and getting clean. Any one of those things falls through, there's a chance he will be back using drugs.
It's not a chance. It's a certainty. I'll break it down. Yes, I'll break this down very simply, just very simply. The 20 is for Bubs to go and buy drugs. That's what the money's for, and then he can cop. The 20 the 20 is for drugs to go and get drugs. Bubs to go and get information. The way Bubs goes and gets information is by going out on that corner and copping. That's how Bubs effectively works as a snitch. So Kima giving him the $10 initially was as much as she was going to give Bubs in order to go and get high, because she knew he would take the money and buy drugs with it and go and get high. So the smaller amount that he has, the less drugs he can buy. Yep. That's just her being her.
Yeah.
Jimmy says, I respect the work. He's not looking at Bubs as a person.
Nope.
Those are the two. That's the different dynamic. And so the 20, you're right, is significant. And it's significant in a lot of different ways. And the particular thing about that 20 is significant is because it's basically, Bubs, I've never seen you as a person. I'm telling you somebody that is close to you just got shot. I'm being impacted by it. You may be impacted by it, but who cares? Because I don't care, because it's about me. Here's the 20 to go buy some drugs, to do your thing, to get me information for Kima so I can get the arrest. So his inherently selfish behavior, which is fine when it's just consolidated to you, then becomes destructive when manifested outwards. Yeah. And that 20 is the idea of is the tangible part of that self-destruction. It's almost like a transference, right? We're looking at two self-destructive motherfuckers here. And they're both very self-destructive, both in their own ways. And it's almost kind of like a transference of it. My pain was going to have me drunk and in a space. He had Daniels to snap him out of it. Bubs just had a beat down. Now here's my pain transferred in this $20. Go and do your thing. Okay. Without a thought about the humanity of the person.
Yeah, no question about it. And again, it shows you the differences of the characters in regards to McNulty versus Kima.
This is a big one. This is a big one. It's a huge one. It doesn't just show you the differences. It shows you which is why I backed off of McNulty as being some type of model archetype, because I don't think that's accurate. And I think they are giving multiple bites at the apple or multiple at-bats to show you how corrosive that not only his personality, but remember, these guys are archetypes. All the characters are archetypes. So how corrosive the police environment is and what it does. It dehumanizes. And in this instance, McNulty is dehumanizing Bubbles. It's a big deal. It's a big, huge deal. It not only have ramifications for it not only has ramifications for who McNulty is as a person, but it also has very long existing ramifications for the character who is Bubbles.
No question about it. The following scene, you have McNulty, Levy, and Perlman. McNulty threatens Levy, threatens to expose Levy and his dirty dealings in terms of financial reports. If he doesn't give up Sabino, he knows, of course, Sabino, he's rep Sabino last four court cases, and he knows that he can send out word to him. So he shits on Levy right in front of Perlman. Perlman reluctantly in the office agrees with McNulty once Levy asks him, am I hearing this from the state's attorney's office? And she says yes. Then when they go outside, Perlman, goes at McNulty saying, listen, you can't shit on people like that who have an impact on my career. Perlman has her own ambitions. She wants to get certain places. She wants to move up in the world. McNulty basically doesn't give a shit. He says, he says everybody in this system wants to get paid, wants to move up to another position. He wants to move up another position, wants to be friends, at the behest and at the sacrifice of real police work and solving cases. And Perlman ends the scene basically says, and again, you can go back to the last scene. Perlman says, "You will use anyone," and that's how that scene ends.
Yeah. So this is again, like I said, like they do. I mean, great scene, fantastic all the way through. Everybody involved, fantastic, just fantastic, fantastic to watch. And so this is a much more digestible way to present McNulty to get the point that we were just talking about. The thing with him and Bubs is subtle. There's a lot of things you got to be plugged into to really digest that. And you're never going to digest that just seeing the episode once. You got to see that multiple times to digest those type of subtleties. Not just in that circumstance, and a variety of different things that The Wire and good shows do. But this is a much this one another nothing to right space. You all you do. And that's what she's saying, because that's what he's doing. This is exhibit B, by the way, in terms of the argument the show is making on subtlety, or not subtlety, patience, taking a step back and using some investigative manner style, i.e. Freeman, versus just reacting emotionally, McNulty, in this scene. Number 3, because I'll connect this one back when we get closer to the scenes that are coming later on. But also number 3, this is another scene that's a perfect example of the difference between how I viewed it at 23 versus how I now view it at 40, right? At 23, I was like, yeah, McNulty, da-da-da-da-da, yeah, corrupt lawyers, blah, blah, everything like that. And then now I look at it now, and it's obvious he played it wrong. It's 1,000% obvious he played it wrong. Not only in the episode will it be obvious that he played it wrong, but just in terms of the accumulations of experiences I've had, I know I've had the least amount of success when I've gone into a situation that required some subtlety, that required some depth, that required not just yelling or just being as blunt as possible. And I came in there with in that space, being as blunt, being as forward, being in my emotions as possible, and how that flipped on me. And when I look back on those situations, I wish I had done something different. And so when I was looking at this, I was like, yeah, this is going to be one where if there was a real McNulty looking back on this, he would be like, I wish I had played this one differently.
So you think he played it wrong in terms of how he came
We'll get there. We'll
okay.
get there. There's no way to get to that part until we get to the end.
All right, so we had Freeman and Prez. They realized that Weebay's pager. They realized, and this mostly Prez, by the way, realizes that that this was Weebay's pager number that was making the calls to Stringer. That was making the calls to Stringer. They connected from previous police work that they had done that night of a couple episodes back. Even I think even going back to when Omar shot Weebay. So Perez does good police work in terms of making that connection, figuring out that it was his pager number, which would give them, gives them the other shooter. From that standpoint, anything you want to add to that?
Nope.
Then you have Daniels, Burrell, Foster, and Rawls all in the office. The commissioner wants immediate raids. He wants a photo op, based on, to try to make himself look good, to try to make him seem like the case is moving forward, not the actual Barksdale case, but in terms of who shot Kima. And he doesn't, of course, this will obviously compromise the Barksdale case. And this is, of course, where Daniel says the epigraph, dope on the table. Forrester says, we're showing them who we are. And Daniels retorts, well, and who exactly are we? So Daniels is pissed. as rightfully so, because this will this is going to expose him that much more to the Barksdales and allow the Barksdales to make moves and change things up by going after certain stash houses. But again, Burrell is, the commissioner. Burrell wants this very much. The commissioner says this, but Burrell wants this as well in regards to wanting to make these raids, and he's been a buy bust type, authority figure throughout the course of the season. So this falls right in line with what Burrell's line of thinking. But the commissioner that you saw earlier in the season, other in the episode, he sends out the immediate order that Wayne raids, and he wants, again, similar to a leader of the U.S. just wanted a photo op, and that's how that scene ended with the epigraph of "Dope on the Table." What were your thoughts?
Yeah. So again, so this is institution, right? There could be a variety of different motives behind why they're doing it. What I perceive is that a cop has been shot. They need to make a statement, and the statement is a response, and the response looks like what the responses always look like. That's what I mean by me. That's what I mean for me personally when I talk about systemic stuff. The ability to change up tactics, and the reason that they don't change it tactics is why the criminals can, quote unquote, predict their moves so clearly ahead of time, and can create whole protocols that can befuddle the police. That's why that's such a problem. And so that's how I took this response. And so part of that is dope on the table, right? If you're going to make a big show, you make a big show of going in, kicking down doors, and arresting. And the big things that come out of the arrests of drug dealers are money, weapons, and drugs. Got to see those three things on the table. And so basically, to your point, what that means is photo op. And what that photo op means is tried and true practices. And what tried and true practices mean is we break open the dusty old playbook and we do these things right here that are ultimately for show, but will have no bearing on anything meaningful at all.
Yeah. I mean, we, different situation, but we saw last week how much a photo op actually means in the grand scheme of getting shit done for things that actually matter. So we saw that exhibit itself in real life in this country last week. So that's why I couldn't help but to think about that when I was watching.
I mean, it's just a photo op is a photo op. I mean, like, it's inherent in the name. There's no purpose
Yeah,
of photo opportunity other than getting your picture taken.
Yep. Yeah.
And so it says it right there. Like, we don't even have to like a photo op is inherent in what it is.
So you have Savino, Levy, McNulty, Bunk, Landsman, and Perlman, Nathan all in the room. Savino is willing to take the charge, willing to eat the charge. They don't have any, and refuse, of course, is not going to give up. And we've seen this out throughout the course of the series. No Barksdale soldier is going to give up anybody up until this point. Savino falls right in line with that, says he'll do the years. Said Levy says that argues for Savino in terms of that he was just trying to defraud Orlando of the cash, so try to disconnect him from any from in terms of the shooting. In terms of that, so Savino only gets the 3 years. You have McNulty tell Levy at the end of the scene, nicely done. You have Bunk says you know, that goes 3 years, a $5,000 fine. Bunk says, "Oh shit, you still up 25,000 based on the, the 30,000, of course, that was missing." So again, the example of the system playing out, and also loyalty within the and continuous loyalty within the Barksdale organization. That, you know, Savino wasn't going to give anybody up and was going to eat. Was just said and basically said, I will do the years, do the 3 years. What are your thoughts on this scene?
All right, so this is now the one that connects back to McNulty going into the lawyer's office. So McNulty said it himself at the very end. What'd he say to
Levy?
yeah, what'd he say?
He said, I wouldn't wipe my ass with a Boston.
No. What'd he just say right there? You just
I
said it.
said nicely done. Yeah. Nicely done.
What did Savino get that was not already planned for him?
Nothing.
Any extra? Did any of the threats that McNulty make towards Levy gain them anything?
No.
Did he give away information beforehand?
No, nothing was gained. Like nothing.
So was Levy able to come in with a better game plan based off McNulty going in there and running his mouth?
Yeah, I think, Levy, clearly Levy, you had to think that Levy talked to Savino and they consulted with the higher-ups from the Barksdales to say.
So Savino, we knew he was going to get the 3 years because Stringer talks about it. He says he's going to have to eat the charge. Like he already knew that. So this is already well planned in advance, right? Like in terms of like, if something goes wrong, this is what X, Y, and do. So all of that is locked in. Savino's not saying anything. He's not going to go beyond the 3 years and everything like that. All that is locked in. And so then on top of that, instead of the police being able to come at Savino with something unexpected, the way McNulty plays it is he kind of delivers he gives up every strategy that they had in the process, and Levy comes in there well prepared. Let's just say that. Yeah. Well prepared.
Yes.
Already prepared for what they had, of course, been prepared for, but now even more prepared and better prepared based off of all the threats to himself that could have potentially gotten some other things moving if made in a different context. Anyways, all that neither here nor there. That's just kind of like what I meant by McNulty played that wrong. I think overarching though is the sense of what, to your point, what the system looks like on both ends, right? Like it can be wielded in a way that is hugely unfair to a group of people, but also if you have the means to protect yourself, then that system could be very protective of you. In a lot of cases, can be overly protective when you are dead ass wrong. And so this is the flip side of that, right? They have the means to protect different members in their organization, even when those members are dead ass wrong, and is by using the system against itself. Or how it was intended for people with privilege. But that's neither here nor there. So you're 100% correct. I just want to call out what you said in terms of systemic. This is the flip side of that, where you can actually use the system to your benefit as a criminal organization.
No question about it. McNulty gave Levy.
Gave away the store.
It's almost like, if you're playing chess, you make an immediate move and it sacrifices moves that it kills you down the road. So
here's what you don't do in chess. You don't make a move and then you don't yell at the person and tell them the next moves you're gonna do.
Exactly. It's like, yes. No,
That's what you definitely don't do
you
in
don't
chess.
know. No, that goes back to your point of being subtle.
Yes.
So Zarino gets a 3 years. They turn in, the bacon soda, whatever. Again, Levy brought that there.
That's what it was. That's what he was able to conjure up.
Yeah. Yes. But
The bacon soda excuse.
But no, this was, to your point, and you're 1,000% right. It was not played. That was poorly played by one McNulty. So you have Poot and Bubbles. By the way, I made a mistake earlier. This was the scene where D'Angelo and Bodie were talking about what transpired and some of the ramifications of what possibly could happen with the fallout of Kima being shot. And they were talking about Little Man and saying, you heard Bodie saying Park Heights dudes got all heart and no brains, and talking about Little Man for shooting Kima. And important in this scene, you have Poot and Bubbles. Poot is receiving the stash, dropped down out of a window. All the years I've watched this show, I never noticed this. He waits for Bubbles to walk past him, seemingly intentionally. Seemingly he waited for Bubbles to walk past him before he received the stash. And I don't think Bubbles did not see him take that stash from out the window. So
you guys zoom out a little bit on Real. You looking way too specific to the scene. You're right. He does pause and wait, but you just gotta zoom out a little bit.
So Poot receives the stash by the payphone. Again, going back to similar to earlier in the season, earlier in the episode where you saw Bodie receive the stash being dropped out the window, and Bubbles walks past. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, because I noticed the exact same thing. That's why I'm saying zoom. You guys, I zoomed out a little bit because there's no inherent reason for Poot to wait for him unless he's like, damn, I haven't seen Bubbles around for a while. And so what that scene does is connect you back to like Bubbles is legit clean. In terms of this wasn't a take the chip high and then go get high type of situation. This was, he had been out of the game for a while to the point that it was actually noticeable. And so that was just another kind of like connection. Like he was really clean and now he really has to go back in here.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say, I don't think Poot was on the Bubbles as a snitch. No.
No. That's what I'm saying. I know you weren't saying, I'm just saying it actually doesn't have anything to do with the actual moving parts of anything that's going on in that scene. It is just, it's so obvious and we both recognized it because it's meant to be obvious. They don't do anything out there, but it's not meant to connect with anything in that scene outside of to let us know that Bubbles was really clean and that Poot noticed Bubbles because Bubbles hadn't been around the pit for a while.
Yeah. So you have D'Angelo being summoned by Stringer. We'll get to that later on. We'll match up with the scene later on. So we'll connect that later on in the episode. This will be an important scene with Weebay. The detail. Daniel's giving instructions to the detail on the up and coming raids. Now, important thing about this is they're going to hold back on the main. They're going to hold back on the main targets. They also main stash. Well, no, the main, yeah.
Main stash.
Yeah. And we also get revealed that they know that the Barksdales are now dropping stashes out the windows by Big Herc.
Well, that's what they were going to give them. And sorry, you go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. They
No,
also
no, no. Go finish with the description. I'm jumping all in your face.
they know that the Barksdales now have started to drop the stashes out of the windows. What were your thoughts?
Okay. So that's really important because, like, even at the beginning of this episode, I'm like, why are they focusing so much on them dropping stuff out windows? But it connects the point of that's what Daniels was going to give them instead. And also, that's another point in how Herc and Carver's investigative abilities have grown, even through this short time in the case. Because you got Cole, who was like there, but he's just like looking for Savino, just like, like, I don't know what it is. Savino, I don't know. And Herc recognizes Bodie, but instead of the usual thing where he usually calls Carv and says, Carv, there's Bodie, let's go whoop his ass. He's like, let me see. He doesn't, of course, say this. It's just with the reaction. Let me see what Bodie's going to do. And then he watches the stash come down, take those pictures and everything. So I just, that was earlier on an example of just kind of like how they're growing as investigative police, even throughout this tiny investigation. Now, the reason why the dropping out is important has nothing to actually do with, they of course know they move stash outs and do all the different stuff. That doesn't have anything to do with tactically how they're going to approach this. What it does is it gives Daniels a way to potentially get dope on the table without having to give up the stash house. So he was going to use the information that Herc had gathered investigatively to offer up to the superiors as a method to get dope on the table, knowing that, it was highly unlikely since they move all the stashes all the time. It was highly unlikely, and Herc's hasn't investigated. His powers haven't grown that far in terms of like, yeah, he knows, but then he's like, yeah, but they move them all the time. Anyway, he's not thinking like if this is a chess piece and a chess move. The person who is much, much better suited to thinking like that is his voice is curiously absent during this time. So, anyways, it shows what Gaines was going to do, and then by the absence of somebody being there, huge pointer for the future.
Yeah, there's a noticeable absence of somebody who was there while those directions were being given. A noticeable one. We'll find out.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll find out. We'll find out before the season is over with, because there's only 2 more episodes in this season left. But there's a note. Just notice, if you're an audience watching, notice who's not there in that particular.
He's there. He's there in both of those scenes. His voice is absent. That's what I meant. He's there in both of the scenes.
Right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. Stringer, D'Angelo, Weebay. Stringer tells D'Angelo to go with Weebay. Tells Weebay keep it clean, no mistakes. D'Angelo was completely just didn't befuddled in terms of why he's going with Weebay. Again, Stringer.
Nobody tells him.
Yeah, he has.
Nobody tells him.
Nobody. They don't tell him anything.
Nope.
Idris Elba in the scene was tremendous. His just acting without saying anything, basically. I mean, I know he had a couple of lines, but just his, how, just just sitting down. I mean, he has some water, takes an aspirin. It was just, I thought he was brilliant in that scene, menacing without saying anything, just with his like just body language, and just it was almost what he didn't say had you thinking like, what the fuck is going on? When I first saw this scene, I was like what's going on with this? I did not think about what was going to go on with D'Angelo, but yeah, it's tells him, tells Weebay, hey, don't make no mistakes. Let's go. D'Angelo tries to wait out maybe some more information. Then Stringer says, what the fuck you waiting for? And that's that. What were your thoughts?
Oh, they didn't follow out everything. I'm trying to think. It's not even going to be the biggest mashup, like connecting the scenes, but I think I do need to get to the scene where they're actually at his apartment.
Got you. All right, so the detail, Major Reed realizes that they held back main targets of the raids. He yells at Daniel. Yeah, he yells at Daniels. And then the detail comes in. McNulty, Freeman come into Daniels' office. Well, maybe it wasn't McNulty. I think it was Freeman.
No, it's McNulty. You're right.
No, well, okay. McNulty and Freeman come in Daniels' office, and they realize that at that point that somebody's been talking to Burrell about snitching within the detail. There's a snitch within the detail. Daniels, says that at first when we began the case that he was the snitch to Burrell, that he was telling Burrell everything. And then Freeman says, well, he lost you and he found somebody else. And then we look around the room, everybody's in the room, everybody's there, and then that scene ends. So now we know that there is a snitch within the detail. So what were your thoughts?
I think originally, because I know the answer to this question, of course. So I think originally we're supposed to believe Herc. That's what I think. That as I was reflecting back on this, I was trying to remember, well, what did I think was happening. So that's what I think. I think it's set up that way and revealed that way because we're supposed to think Herc is the one. He's the obvious one.
Right.
I think so.
So you have McNulty and Phelan. McNulty tries to get the judge's help about the raids. The judge is back on the ticket and reluctant to help out McNulty. But McNulty entices him just enough to get Phelan to kind of give in. And again, we learned in this scene about the politics in terms of Phelan now is back on the ticket, and to the points earlier, not earlier in the episode, but earlier in the season, maybe even last week, we talked about this, that Phelan would never go all in the way he once did, considering his position. Remember, he was off the ticket and he wanted no part of it. Now he's back on the ticket and he wants to stay on the ticket. In terms of the mayor's ticket. So he reluctantly assists McNulty once McNulty, that's how I took it, when McNulty says, who's my daddy now? So you had that going, just that was just
really, gotta pause the real. He didn't McNulty wasn't able to get any assistance from him at all. There was nothing he could, because he was back on the ticket, there was nothing he was going to give McNulty. McNulty came for him for help right then and there, to get Daniels. McNulty needed him to get them to back off hitting the main stash house.
Okay,
so that's what McNulty went there for him to get assistance with, and he wasn't going to get any assistance from the judge.
No, so yeah, to your point, because that didn't stop them from backing off the stash houses. Yeah, so the judge is now, again, he's back on the ticket and he is not going to go where he was.
But again, this is on McNulty acting irrationally. He told him last time. He made it very clear where he stood in terms of, or the situation itself was made very clear, I should say, in terms of the mayor. The judge doesn't have a seat dedicated. He has to run. They have him off the ticket. He's not going to help you anymore. So, I mean, McNulty can go to the judge as he did, expecting a different answer, but he got the answer that was going to be the answer.
You have D'Angelo and Weebay. Weebay takes D'Angelo. Well, D'Angelo's driving and takes D'Angelo to his place. D'Angelo begins to think that, thinks that he's going to be killed by Weebay, scared to death. They turn on the lights are off in Weebay's place, and right before D'Angelo, Weebay turns on the lights, you see D'Angelo basically crying, about to start crying, and then you see that you see all the fish that Weebay has, and he realizes that Weebay tells him that he has to go up, he has to go away, take care of my fish while I'm going, and then drive me to Philly. My first thought is I thought he might kill D'Angelo at first. I mean, this scene was shot so well in regards to some of the tension that was built up in the scene. That they did. I thought they did a great job at kind of building up the tension in this scene. But D'Angelo, he tells D'Angelo, "Hey, we shot a cop. We shot a narco." So he tells him he has to drive him to Philly. He tells D'Angelo he has to drive him to Philly, get some stuff, and before they head out. So, what were your thoughts on this?
Show, not tell.
Yeah.
This is what The Wire does best when it's doing it. And so this scene right here does more than any other scene, and you can combine them all, of D'Angelo at setting up why he will do what he does at the end of the season. This is a complete setup for that. It's just a complete and total setup for that. And they're showing you, it's quite simple. I mean, it's such a simple equation. And when you see it, it makes all the sense in the world. It doesn't have to do about hard and blah, 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 or who did this and that, or who's uncle, everything. He does not want to die. It's that simple. Like when you really break human beings down, we're actually really simple creatures. But so or can be expressed in very simple ways. And so by showing you that he does not want to die, it answers all those questions we had about D'Angelo. And sets up for what is going to happen later on in the season. That's as much as I can say about it without really getting into everything.
Yeah. No, it's definitely some setup with that in terms of his character with that particular scene. So you go to the detailed, Bubbles lets the detailed know who hasn't been in the pit. It gives them Little Man's name, and then you have right before they're about to go on the raids, and then you have the raids. You have the raids where you have Herc and Carver during the raids. They hit the stash houses, hit some of the stash houses. And you have Herc and Carver both take money without anybody knowing. Of course, we saw him early in the season. Think about taking money, and then Herc, basically had to talk Carver out of it. No, excuse me, Carver had to talk Herc out of it. But this time they both take money because, again, this stash house there was no wiretap on this particular. There was no way that anybody would know that they had taken the money this time. So they take the money, and then you see the police commissioner with the press conference with the dope on the table and the photo op that we discussed earlier in the episode.
That was a lot that happened, or I remember that being spaced out more.
Well, I mean, the part that you
No,
So
no, 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 no. You're right. You're right. You're right. I mean, that's there's a lot that I have to say about like each segment of that. Um, so the first part of it is before anybody goes anywhere, Bubs is at the table and he still has that 20 in his hand.
yes, he's still yes. Yep.
And if McNulty would have just asked the question
Yeah.
at that moment, they could have talked. Because he was looking for somebody to say, he was looking to talk. He was looking to talk. He did not want it's just those are the things that are just so human and so heartbreaking and so real to me that I can no longer separate out the character, the show, and the like all those different parts. That's where you get me as a viewer. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just it's yep, yep. That is it. That's the good stuff to me. Um, so you have that, and that's tough because we know exactly what's going to happen with Bubs. So that's tough. And then do you have the raids themselves that happen? And it's interesting, right? Because I talked a lot about Herc and Carve's growth, right? And um and you didn't bring it up, so I got to go back and remember specifically the scene that I liked was when they were talking to each other about a particular strategy. So I just got to go back and watch and just be really detailed in my memory of it. But also, you wouldn't think I would use an example of them stealing money as growth because that's where they were at the very beginning of the series. But to your point, how they did it showed growth in the way in which they're thinking about things. Also, even though I do believe they were leaning us towards Herc, I do think, of course, they want it up in the air. So it really is the mystery of who could have. So this puts both of them on an even playing field with one of the last images that we'll see of them. So just from a storytelling component, it's very interesting. I mean, it's very purposeful how they set that entire thing up. The main thing I want to talk about was that last shot. So here's what I noticed this time. So you have the commissioner who was up, the white commissioner, who is up and he's going to give kind of like, this is dope on the table, this is everything that we see, and yada yada yada. He even leans over to Burrell at the very beginning. So let me not make it like he never ever talked to Burrell. He leans over the beginning, says Burrell, excellent work, or great police work. And so there's a lot of what is going on that is under the umbrella right now. I think of what the show is specifically talking about in the moment that scene was put together and put together for television is that that the police department can't get out of its own way. So I wholly recognize that that's probably everything about like what this was constructed about. They can't get out of their own way. They don't know who to promote. You know, red tape, the bureaucracy of it all. But I do think things happen for a reason. And we happen to be talking about The Wire at a very, very interesting time in America. And so I'm very struck by the last shot. Everybody can go around it. The cinematographer or whoever you would say shot it or called for that shot, it had it framed in a specific way. It has the commissioner, it has the white detective, I can't ever remember his name because he's always the older man who's just stressed out, and it has Rawls. Those are the three who are framed. Yeah, him. Those are the three who are framed in that shot. as they are talking about this policing that they did, this investigative process that they did, and what it reaped. Now, the way that I know that it probably wasn't speaking specifically to the way that a uh, uh, white-minded, racist, systematic police force goes about policing its people, is because then the next shot is of Daniels, Freeman, and McNulty looking at the press conference and listening to the commissioner talk about all the effort and work in there, and they're just like dismissive of it and go back to doing what they were doing. So that tells me that what they were probably wanted to say were much more along the lines of, these guys didn't put in the work, yet they're reaping the credit, the benefits, or saying all these different things. The people who on the ground, who we watch in on a day-to-day basis in The Wire, are the ones who actually do the work, yet they are nothing. They're nowhere to be found. Their voices are lost. So that being stated there, but I do think The Wire is talking about and has the forethought to talk about systems and how systems fail the people they're supposed to be setting up for success, or in this case, the people they're supposed to be protecting. And I think that shot is framed that very specific way in terms of that's the old guard. And however you define any old guard of anything in this country, that means to be of a certain color, right? And to be of a certain what's the word? I was gonna say what's the thing? Sex, of a certain sex. Male. Be a white male. That's the old guard. That absolutely is, and it's pretty much at every institution in this country. And so I just was really struck by how they framed that. This time I really noticed it. I know why I noticed it so much this time around, but it's there nonetheless. And it's very, very intentional. This is not just me picking out something. It's very intentional, and it is a intentional statement in which they're making. So yeah, this is why The Wire is great.
You had that. Following that, you had the Prez ignores Poop and Wallace's call on The Wire and puts it as non-pertinent.
Yeah. It is non-pertinent. If you're Prez, if you're like, I thought about this. If you're Prez, you're listening to that, it's non-pertinent.
Nah, it's I can't say that it's non-pertinent because it's a witness that, I mean, Wallace is a potential witness. How's that non-pertinent?
Yeah, but the way that the police department treated him didn't give any of that importance. That's what we argued about yesterday. I mean, last.
Yeah, but we both understood.
They didn't give him that importance.
But that's the point. They were wrong in that. Yeah. So we understand why. So
on the Wire it says if the organization, the institution doesn't give it importance, why would we expect Prez to give it more importance?
No,
that's not fair.
I understand. No. I understand why they did it, but that's still it's a mistake. It was we agreed that it was a mistake for them to dismiss Wallace last month. Said that. So yeah, it's big. To your point, we're both arguing the same thing. To your point, it should be pertinent, but is viewed, they're being consistent with what last week's episode in terms of how they treated Wallace, and we can talk about the systemic racism as well. Black kids, it all goes. It's the reason why.
Yep.
Yeah. So no, we flushed it out. But no.
So Prez is just somebody at somebody's grandma's house. You talking about
right? Yeah.
They were two kids talking about being at grandma's house.
Now we know, and we'll see that
how big, it's the most pertinent. That was gonna be more pertinent.
Yeah, it couldn't be more pertinent. We'll find out next episode, which will be a big episode, to say the least, with episode 12. So you had that, and then the final shot.
But actually, really, really quickly, good job calling it back out, Ril. because you're right. You're 100% correct. In terms of, I'm just thinking about it, like, just if Wallace was given the proper respect as a witness, then everybody's on that. Like, everybody's on it. That doesn't pass by anybody. But because he was not given any respect as a witness from last week, it doesn't even matter if the call itself was pertinent, not pertinent. What matters is that Prez doesn't give a shit.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Because nobody. So yeah. Good job calling that back out. Because that's very accurate.
Yeah, and it speaks to your point about you talking about the corrosion of just a system or police work, and how that filters throughout throughout those institutions and those systems, how they can be corrosive, and that Prez had been, Prez had turned the corner as far as, and I'm not knocking Prez on this, but he's part of that system. But Prez had been a guy throughout the last 5 or 6 episodes that had been on the money as far as breaking codes, and he's going to see finance reports and things like that. So Prez mentally is on he's been on the job, he's been on point. So it's just a matter, but it doesn't matter how talented somebody is if you're gonna go. You're a lot of times, and we know this. You could be a product of the system that you're a part of, and you can't overtake that system that's already been hammered in for years upon years.
Yep.
So you have Kima in the hospital, basically on life support, as the final shot of the episode. Now, a couple things on this. During the time that this first came out, you did not know whether or not Kima was going to live or die. There were no big stars. This show, when it came out, this was an ensemble cast. There was no, James Gandolfini's on this show, so to speak. So anybody could be killed at any time. Originally,
even I mean, like, this first season too, like, it just, I mean, The Wire never got gangbusters ratings anyway.
right.
But this first, I mean, like, I'm backing up your point. The first, like, it just was The Wire. It just was this show, and people were on it. It just wasn't in anybody's social conscience at that point, or conscience at that point in time, to even be able to figure out what they were trying to do. So it's just like, yeah, this chick, I probably didn't even know her name at all. I probably didn't know her character name that well or her real name that well, which I always forget. Sonia Son.
Sonia Son. Yeah, Sonia Son.
Anyways, in general, but definitely back then, yeah, I mean, it was a cop that was shot and could die.
Yeah, so originally when the scripts came out, she was supposed to die in the season. David Simon and her got into an argument. She fought for her character, but the thing that clinched it was one of the big wigs at HBO, Carolyn Strauss, says, "No, you're gonna keep her alive." So the big wig outranked David Simon's word to keep her alive, and whoever Carolyn Strauss was right, because Kima would become one of the integral parts of the series throughout the course of the 5 seasons. But she was supposed to die in season 1, and so was Omar too. He was supposed to die. I forgot to mention that he wasn't supposed to last as long as he lasted by any stretch of imagination. So if you're wondering, why she's on life support, and it's kind of like wondering why were they keeping us kind of dramatic, playing it out. They wasn't playing it out like a soap opera. She probably, I mean, that character came close to being killed. So you saw that they had that to end the scene in the episode. I also wanted to mention a scene that was powerful too that I didn't mention. I should have mentioned this. The scene where her girlfriend Cheryl is on the couch and she's rubbing the marker print that Kima left earlier during the season when she was doing her homework. Very, very powerful, well acted scene by I don't know who plays the girl named Cheryl. I forgot the actress's name, but that was a very powerful scene. Thinking about the consequences of the job, thinking about the conversation they had at the bar last episode, and knowing, she Kima telling her, basically saying, I know that you don't like it. I know that you don't like this line of work, but I love police work, and so I thought I would mention that scene. That was a well acted scene by that actress. And it only is about a minute long. It wasn't even barely 30 seconds, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. As they're playing a song, forgot the name of the song, Some Sugar in My Bowl. They're playing a song, and she's thinking about Kima, who was in the hospital on basically on somewhat in critical condition. So the episode ends with Kima being in the hospital bed. A lot of before we get to MVPs and the Chardine Award, this episode just showed you institutions, basically, the police institution and the criminal institution basically failing each other. And basically, when you think about overall, think about the episode overall, they both make mistakes that cripple their own selves. They both couldn't get out their own way. Think of Stringer sending those guys out with the money, and how bad of a choice that was. Think of McNulty's choices and what he did, and his dismissing Bubbles, but also how he spoke to Levy, and how and then also with the dope on the table, the raids and stuff like that. So just you saw institutions not being able. You saw both institutions, the criminal and the police, not being able to get out of their own way over the course of the episode. And kind of like, the episode's called The Hunt. They're kind of like hunting, but they're kind of like just, imagine being on a hunt, and imagine you just getting lost. When you're on a hunt for something, you can't get out of your own way in life. And when you're trying to have a goal to obtain, and you just doing things to just constantly get in your own way. That's what it kind of was. Kind of was like during this particular episode. MVP, I had a difficult time with the MVP. The Chardine Award for acting, I gave it to McNulty. I thought that he, in those hospital scenes, the scenes with Rawls, the scenes where he was at the crime scene, even the scenes when he was during the Levy and Perlman, I thought he was tremendous in this episode, his acting, his performance. So he got the Chardine Award for Best Actor, Best Performance. MVP, I kind of had it split between. I didn't have a split. I did have a split. I had a split between Freeman and Bubbles as MVP.
You ready for mine, or you got
more?
No,
yeah, go ahead.
So MVP, I'm going to give to McNulty and Bubbles for both of their scenes. They are my MVPs. It's not close. And then my just, I guess my like just kind of like under like just chill actor performance. A big part of me wants to give it to, since I did a dyad or two, I'm gonna give it to Carver and King's girlfriend for their scene outside the
yeah, that was a I forgot that was a powerful.
They did a lot there.
Did a lot. With little,
Very cool. Very cool stuff.
No, it was.
The way that she changes from you know, like there's not like a lot of words that's being used, but she's just like Kima's at work. Like that first, it just like watching her cycle through all of the kind of like the different, like it didn't just go from like, oh, I'm clueless to now I'm like devastated. It actually never got to devastated. Um, yeah, watch that again. She
No,
plays that.
I thought no,
She plays that off the chart. I'm not saying that to you. She plays that off the charts because it's good. It's just it's so good, and it never gets to the obvious level. Feels very human, very real. How somebody would react in a situation like that. And I just want to say a little bit about Carver. Again, it's just the subtle little things, and it's just like I love the fact that his character said, "I'll go there." I mean, character said, "I'll do it," and then he's there, and then that kind of that awkwardness of when she first arrives, what to say to her till she gets to the door. You're watching his face like change, or not change, like go through that thought process of I probably thought about what I was going to say when I saw her a million times. Now she's actually here and I've lost that completely. Now what do I do? And you can see that on his face as he gathers himself. And the only thing that he says, of course, is, does he even say a sentence or does he just say Kima? But he says very little. That's the point. He says very little, but it's in how he said it. That gives Cheryl, not the actress name, the character's name, Cheryl, the breath to you know, her one word statement of Kina's at work.
Yeah, he does when she says that. When she says that Kima's at work,
yeah,
he nods his head, he shakes his head. And
yeah, I mean, it's just
it is a well. I mean, both performances.
That damn thing they did.
It paid off. That was both performances were great, and she, like I said, both scenes that she was in. Again, 2 short scenes, she destroys both of them. Like both of those scenes that she was in, she destroys. Which, you know, again, is the beauty of the show that even characters who are not major characters or characters who are recurring characters or characters who may only get a couple scenes in a season, they make those scenes pay off. They make those scenes pay off. So that definitely, her performance definitely stood out over the course of this episode, and getting 2 powerful scenes in it. And I can see why you had her. You can definitely see her why you had her for acting performance, for best performance, acting performance, along with Carver in this episode. So again, great episode in terms of the fallout of Kim being shot. Next week you will have a big episode, the penultimate episode of this series of the first season. Remember, this season had 13 episodes. Season 4 had 13 episodes too. The other 2 seasons were 12. Well, not 12. Yeah, 2 and 3 were 12, and the last season was 10 episodes. But this, along with season 4, was the longest season. But again, you have a major episode coming up next week with title Cleaning Up. So looking forward to that. As always, thanks to Robert Sapp for joining me, sir.
All right, sir. You be healthy, be safe.
You too. Take it easy.
Later.
That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Ril Dil podcast, The Wire Remix. I'm your host, Ril Dil Quinn. We will be putting this episode up later on this evening. Stay tuned for it. Enjoy the rest of the evening. So long.